You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
So this is the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast with Jeremiah Morrell, Dakota Davis, and Danny Morrell. This is going to be a pre-recorded audio phone interview that we did with Robin Miller. He's the racing journalist. You'll read his stuff on Racer.com, NBC Sports. He covers auto racing, mostly Indycar. And then he had a history with in the city of Indianapolis covering the Pacers and IE basketball and the Indianapolis Colts. So this is going to be our interview. It's pre-recorded. First time we've done something via telephone, so it's a little bit different. You'll notice the nervousness in your host's voice. He'll get better at that sort of thing, but enjoy Robin Miller. So this is the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast. We have Danny Morrell sitting here with me, my baby brother, and Dakota Davis, my co-host, as always. Gentlemen, we got Robin Miller on the line.
How's it going, Robin?
Good, fellas.
I want to be able to
Good
call
to be with
you.
you.
I want to be able to call you R like JMV does, though.
Yeah.
That's a friend of mine I used to race with in USAC, Bobby Grimm Jr., whose dad was Indy 500 Rookie of the Year in 1959, was the guy that first started calling me that. It's just easier. It's just everybody has a nickname, and that's the easiest nickname of all.
It could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Bill Vukovich used to call me Bird Boy, and that stuck for. I was called Bird Boy all through the 70s. That's hard to live. That's a tough one to live down.
What's the origin of that nickname?
Well, just Robin, Bird Boy. So,
Oh, okay.
that
That's obvious.
So our show bases out of Henry County. You're from Anderson originally and spent some time in Muncie too, right?
Well, I was born in Anderson, and then my parents moved to Indianapolis, when I was like 1 or 2, and then I went to Ball State for 2 quarters before I flunked out. And let me just tell you something. You got to work at it to flunk out of Ball State, boys. That's not an easy thing to do.
There was a
The
meme.
party school of the Midwest.
There was a
and I
meme
flunked
running
out of
around
Ball State in 2
today
quarters.
with David Letterman, and he said that Ball State was the Harvard of Muncie. I went to Ivy Tech in Muncie, so it's like the Ivy Tech of Muncie, I guess. Yeah, it's it's the lowest end of the university scale in Delaware County.
Right. Letterman was a Rhodes Scholar compared to me at Ball State. We used to joke about that because what's interesting is, so Dave gets fired from Channel 13. He's doing the weather, and the final straw was when he said there was hail the size of cantaloupes falling in Beech Grove, and they fired him on the spot. That's it, you're out. Because he was always making fun of the weather, which should be made fun of. So Jeff Smullian, who owns Indianapolis Monthly, the radio station 1070's Fan, countless radio and TV stations across the country. His very first station, his father helped him buy a station that was a religious station. It was an AM station over on the southeast side of Indy. So he hired Letterman to be the 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock drive time guy, and they hired me to do the sports. Now, can you imagine the people that used to listen to that show every day thinking they were going to get some kind of religious they were going to be preached to, or they were going to talk about the Bible or the scriptures or whatever they want, and suddenly David Letterman shows up at 3 o'clock to 6. He wasn't really a big religious guy, so that was kind of a culture shock. So whenever I see David, Letterman comes to 4 or 5 races a year, so whenever I see him, we usually get around to talking about his glorious start in radio.
You were. You're also joined by Dakota Davis here, and he's a graduate of Tri-High, I guess elementary and the high school.
Yes, both in the same building.
Now, Tri is the school that Marion Pierce went to, or he was at Louisville, and that became Tri. So
Louisville, right?
He's like the basketball legend before Steve Alford in our part of the world, and I didn't know if you had any comments on his career or his history.
Well, you got to remember back then to score as many points as he did, and it changed during my lifetime. Sometimes freshmen were eligible to play, sometimes they weren't. Then you had the three-point line. When I think about Louis Dampier and Billy Shepard and Rick Mount, Billy Keller, David Shepard, do you realize even Steve Alford? You realize how many points they'd have scored if they had a three-pointer? So to think that Marion Pierce scored that many points when there was nothing but 2 points for a basket, and the games were slowed down, and it's an amazing statistic that he scored that many points in the era he did it in.
Right. Yeah, Marion Pierce. I've actually been vacationing with him a few times. Like, yeah, and
You wild man.
Yeah. He basically my wife's family and him and his family have the same condo in Florida, and my one of my best friends, actually the best man at my wedding, his grandfather is good friends with Marion Pierce, and he told a story of one time him and Marion got pulled over, and Marion apparently loves to eat like fast food burger joints, like it's kind of his thing, and so Marion gets pulled over on the side of the highway, and for some reason the police officer like had asked to open the door because he recognized Marion, wanted to meet him, and all of Marion's fast food wrappers and everything went flying out the door into a cornfield, and Marion Pierce and this state trooper and my best friend's grandfather were out in a cornfield chasing down Burger King wrappers and cups in the cornfield. And if that's not a better representation of Henry County, then I just don't know what is.
Well, I don't know. I like Mark Dismore's go-kart track. That's pretty cool.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so Dismore, he founded that track out there, and I don't think locals understand the kind of gem they have. It's truly world class. You know, in September they have the Robo Hong out there, and they've had the Dan Weldon tournament or the Dan Weldon weekend. It's gone away the last couple of years, but I mean, you've had 5 or 6 Indy 500 starters come out there every year for that thing. It's like an all-star race in the fall.
Well, not to mention a lot of Indy guys go there during the season just to stay sharp in between races. I mean, but Mark was a hell of a race driver in his own right, and of course, you know, him and his dad started the karting business and kept it going all those years in Greenfield. So. It's really a world-class go-kart track in Henry County. So I don't know a lot of people know about it, but all the people in the industry all have high regard for it just because they saw how he laid it out, and he's got every kind of corner you can have, and it's pretty fast and pretty challenging. So that's what it's all about. That's what guys want.
Have you had a chance to run out there on one of the rental carts yet?
No, brother. I quit racing in 1983 and unless I could go run Kokomo and a midget all by myself some night, I have no desire to drive a go-kart or anything else. I raced for 12 years, and that was fine. I got to race in USAC in the 70s when all the Indy 500 drivers were still driving midgets. The first time I made a feature at Kokomo, they started 20 cars, I think, and I think 12 of the 20 starters were in that year's Indy 500. So, I mean, it was, you know, I probably, I think I was pretty naive, but I was also, you know, we didn't have Jim Russell schools for midgets or sprint cars. And you had to be 21 years old to get a USAC license back then. So, you know, I talked to Kyle Larson all the time. Kyle Larson had like 500 A-main sprint car starts by the time he was 17 years old. I mean, these kids have so much experience now, and they're so good. They're so on top of things. I mean, it's like night and day. But what was cool about USAC back in the 70s was, you know, we'd go to an IndyCar race, but we'd have a midget race on Friday night, and then half the IndyCar field was in the midget race. So that's why it was popular.
Did you ever run at Mount Lawn there just west of Newcastle?
No, you know, I never did. I've been to a couple races, but they had some core midget races. They had I don't think USAC ever ran there, but it was always a place it's been around forever and it had a pretty good following for a while. I don't know how it's doing. Is it still doing okay?
They do some tractor pulls out there now, but it's closed. I lived about a mile and a half west of there, and every Saturday night it would be a great time. I'd be having a party going on at the house, and we'd set up signs in the front yard, and people would stop and honk, and it was a really, really pretty good time. But going out there and watching people after the races were done take their own street cars out there and daily drivers out there and race against each other side by side is hilarious, because I'd hate to have to explain that to my insurance agent on why I planted my Buick into the wall just on a Saturday night at the track.
Oh, yeah. Well, Kokomo used to have, I think it was Sunday nights, it was basically the only rule was you had to have a seat belt and a helmet, and you could bring anything you wanted on the track, and they'd line 20 or 30 cars up, and these guys would get all sauced up and go out and take the old lady's car and destroy it and probably not remember what happened the next day. So they finally put a stop to the old spectator races because it was a little too risky. I think the insurance people said, this is not a good idea.
Well, that's pretty funny, though.
Yeah, you'd have to nowadays I think they at least put a roll cage in it and take the glass out.
I worked out at the speed. I worked out at the Speedway for the PR department. I worked for Jan Schaefer, and he always used to tell me about all the horrible things that Bobby Unser used to do to rental cars, bottoms of lakes, driving them around Daytona, things like that. What is the worst thing you've ever heard a race car driver do to a rental car?
Well, Bobby Unser and Al Unser were in a league of their own. They were so destructive that they could not rent a car in the continental United States for 3 years. So what they had to do was they had to say, basically, if you were naive enough to not know their history, and they'd said, hey, we need you to help us rent a car here this weekend. We'll pay you up front, and don't worry. So they got a couple guys to do it, and probably the worst thing ever was, I think it was Mossport or San Jovita, I can't remember which one it was, but a really cool road course in Canada, a lot of windy uphill corners and just a real scenic place, and the track was kind of almost on top of a mountain. So they got poor old Jerry Grant to rent him a car, and they were all standing around, and nobody had ever seen the track before. They said, well, let's go out and take a hot lap. And so Jerry Grant, they all started running for their cars, and Bobby Unser took Jerry Grant's keys and threw them 50 yards away, so Grant was the last guy to leave. Well, there was a right-hander that was blind, so he went over this right-hander, and it was a downhill right-hand turn. It was pretty fast. So Bobby Unser parked his rent-a-car in the middle of the track and got out of the car and ran over the side of the road. And Jerry Grant came over the hill and going about 70 miles an hour and T-boned and just destroyed both cars.
Oh my God!
And of course everybody laughed. That was funny. So they got Grant's radiator fixed well enough that it would at least roll. So what they were saying was, look, we're terribly sorry. That was a terrible joke. We'll take the car. Let's take the car back. We'll get another rent-a-car, and we'll push you. We can push you back to the rent-a-car place, and we'll go slow. Well, of course, Jerry Grant, if it's not traumatized enough, he gets in his car, and the Unser brothers start pushing him down the hill, and they start going 40, 50, 60. They push him off the hill. He rolls about 40 yards down an embankment. A tree stops him. I mean, he could have easily died, but that was funny. They loved it. That's the way it was.
High risk lifestyle, and that's the way you go with. So we've got a Facebook live stream, and we got questions coming in from people, and a lot of them are Henry County folks. They're asking about who our Henry County 500 racers have been, or people that have tried. And growing up, Danny and I lived on Messick Road in rural Henry County. There was a guy named Dick Frazier who used to bale hay up the road from us, and I think he was an open wheel driver. And I think in the 40s or 50s he tried to qualify. Do you know that name at all?
I just know the name, but I mean, I was born in '49, so that's a little before me.
You're not Donald Davidson. We don't expect you to have all of them.
No, I mean, I got a lot of old pictures of old drivers, and I know the name Dick Frazier. I don't know if he ever made Indy or not.
Yeah, I think he had heard he had qualified, but never got there. Another local guy that hasn't had his chance and probably at this point isn't going to is Tracy Hines. I know he had a pretty bad accident a couple years ago, and it kind of ended his shot. But he was another one that was in the Tony Stewart genre and never had the opportunity at the 500.
Well, here's the thing about Tracy. If Tracy would have been born 20 years earlier, he'd have been a star in Indycar because you had to run the pavement and the dirt, and the guy was a hell of a race driver. He was a multi-champion in USAC. Now, a lot of people said Tracy was his own worst enemy because he was always saying things he shouldn't. All Tracy was honest. He would say, well, I've won this championship, I've won that championship, I've won this many races, and nobody's given me a ride yet, so what am I supposed to do? He was just merely stating the facts. I mean, we were at Nazareth once, and he was elite. I think he won the USAC race that day. It might have been a Silver Crown race, but we were standing on top of his motorhome watching the IndyCar practice, and I said, have any of these IndyCar owners ever come talk to you? And he just started laughing. He said, they have no idea who I am. So what happened was, when USAC and their infinite wisdom took the dirt cars and made them a separate division and took all the dirt races out of the USAC Championship Trail, it pretty much killed the career path for all the Tracy Hineses that came along in the 80s, 90s, and today. I mean, unless you got a rich dad or a huge sponsor or hit the lottery, you're not going to get a chance. I mean, whether you're Dave Darlin and Kyle Larson got a chance because Tony Stewart and I were at Eldora the night he won the 3-4 Crown races, and Stewart kept saying, I've never seen anything like this. I said, this guy's never seen this track before, and Eldora is a tough place to learn because you got to run up against the fence, and it's not easy.
I know it won't be this year, but is Kyle going to get a shot at Indy at some point with Ganassi?
Nah, Now, it doesn't sound like he's going to get a shot this year, but, he's the guy that people would really like to see run because he's such a complete driver, and he's a throwback to the old days of Gurney and Foyt and Mario and Parnelli, where you can run. He'll run anything, just like Stewart would, and just like Tracy. I mean, Tracy, he had a NASCAR truck ride, and it was a horrible car. He didn't have a chance. So that was the only real chance I think he ever got. But if you'd have put that guy in an Indy car, and you still had dirt races as part of the championship, he would have been in demand because he was so versatile.
Yeah, I think he had a top 5 at is it Mansfield? Is that the track up by Cleveland, the short track they used to run at? I think he had a top 5 up there once. But that's about the extent of his success he had.
But for trucks are for towing race cars. It makes me crazy. Truck series, really.
And then,
I know I'm too old to make without being opinionated about trucks racing. But I'm like, please.
I could get into it a little bit when it was Ron Hornaday and Mike Skinner and those guys, Johnny Benson. But now I couldn't tell you who runs those things anymore. I have no concept.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing is that. It had a little niche audience for a while, and it's gone away. And what NASCAR, the conundrum NASCAR is the Truck Series is the best racing they have. It puts the other two to shame. Their races are 5 times better than NASCAR's Sprint Cup races. I mean, or the who the hell's their sponsor now? I can't remember.
Monster for the Cup Series, right? I guess now is it Monster Energy?
Yeah,
they're almost week to week.
No, it was.
Camping World.
Anyway, they just have a lot of. I mean, I don't know how anybody can sit and watch a NASCAR race. How can you watch 3.5 hours of commercials and Darrell Waltrip rambling on and Michael Waltrip? It's just it's agony. I mean, if I watch it, it's with the channel muted. I can't listen to those guys, and they don't race till you just sit there all day and they just drone around all day, and you're like, what is this all about? So they tried to put in these they tried to give it some pizzazz last year, and they said we're going to have we're going to have sections of races, and you're going to win a section race, and whatever. Who cares? It's just throwing darts at a board. I think NASCAR. I think racing's in trouble. Period. But I think NASCAR might be in more trouble than they ever thought they were because they've lost all their stars, or most of their stars, and they're not really sure. I mean, they had about 2,000 people last week for the race they have every year, the pole winners race. I mean, there was nobody there. There's nobody there tonight watching the twin races on Fox. So, they're down to 39 or 40 cars. NASCAR's got they've got a lot of hurdles to overcome, I think.
So do you think that eventually IndyCar, because the product on track is so much better, and then the Indy 500 really seems to be resurgent. It was really kind of a bummer in the aughts, but it's especially amongst the millennial generation. You go out to the Snake Pit on race day morning, it's just packed. The energy's back. Do you start to see an upswing where you almost have the IndyCar surpassing NASCAR fairly soon as the premier racing league?
No, I work for NBC, and when they got NASCAR a couple years ago, it was probably the smartest thing NBC ever did, because all these cable channels, whether it's CBS or ESPN2 or Fox Sports 1, they're all looking for an identity. Well, NBC spent a lot of money to get NASCAR, and it's been worth it because it put NBC Sports Network on the map. So a good NASCAR race on NBC Sports Network gets anywhere from 3 to 5 million people to watch. A good IndyCar race, like Long Beach or wherever one of our better races is, Road America, if we get 650,000, that's a really good number. So there's such a disparity, and there's still a lot of good sponsors in NASCAR, and IndyCar's making some headway in sponsorships this year. They've got some better, but the average person on the street, fellas, whether in Henry County or New York City or Laguna Beach, California, if you talk to them about racing, they assume you're talking about NASCAR, because IndyCar is still a very well-kept secret.
The telecast on NBC Sports, I love it. You guys do such a great job, and I feel sorry for you having to run down the pit every time, but it's very entertaining, and the broadcast is really well put together. Are they keeping the same crew? Do you know that detail?
Yeah. The thing is, my boss called me about 3 years ago and he said, who can we get in the booth that's got some personality and some knowledge that people know that'll, I said, Paul Tracy. He's like, really? I go, yeah. You just got to try. Paul Tracy has kind of embraced this. I mean, I think he really enjoys it. And him and Townsend Bell, it's not contrived. I mean, they really do argue about everything, whether at dinner or rehearsal or whatever. They're always arguing. But they're both knowledgeable, and they both have passion, and that comes across. That's what you want. That's what you want, and everybody does a good job in the pits, and it's just you can just tell. Terry Lingner's our producer and director, and he's done racing way back on ESPN back in the 80s is when he started. So he's really got his handle on, let's watch this race for fifth, or let's do, it's not just follow the leader, and it's different camera angles, and it's different features, and it's just it's the kind of thing that we're all hoping that in 2019 NBC has the whole schedule.
Yeah, so you guys are
they
up the
probably
TV
would
contract
run
is
6 or
switching,
7
right?
races on national television, which is exactly what IndyCar needs.
Yeah, looking at the, I guess this may be the last year on ABC. That there was a big 10-year contract that was signed by ABC and Versus back in the day, and Comcast wound up buying Versus and turned it into the NBC Sports Network. And yeah, Spangle is exactly right. The quality of the broadcast has just been worlds better. You don't fall asleep watching the watching the NBC guys.
And I thought Kevin Lee was exceptional. I didn't know who the British guy that came back
Kevin
was.
did a really nice job.
Yeah.
Really nice job. Now, Lee Diffie will do all the races play-by-play because Formula One's not with NBC anymore.
Is he over in doing the bobsled stuff again this time for the Olympics like he did 4 years ago?
I think so. I do think so. So Kevin will be back in the pits where he does a really good job there, too. But he did a nice job as play-by-play. It's just that you can't fool race fans. They know. And it's just like Eddie Cheever and Scott Goodyear are both nice guys. They're both knowledgeable. They're both good race drivers. And they know what the hell they're talking about. But there's no chemistry. And it's almost like they're in a morgue. It's like they don't want to be there sometimes. You're like, I just don't understand. You're getting paid to call an auto race. It's fun. It should be fun. It should be. You don't have to scream and yell every lap. I'm not saying that. You just have to have a little energy.
We just have to keep Paul Tracy from sharing the Trump memes so he doesn't get fired. That's all. I think that should be your main goal for the next year, so he doesn't get any hot water.
There's no. It's Paul Tracy. It's tough to keep him in check. You never know what he's going to say. That's why we love him.
Yeah.
So, Robin, who has been your favorite personality to cover over your tenure and your career?
Oh, I probably AJ and Dan Gurney and Mario and Parnelli. Those 4 guys probably, and Jim Hurtubise, who was my first hero in racing. But those are the guys. I talked to Dan New Year's Day for about 45 minutes, and then he caught pneumonia a couple weeks later and died. And I think about how lucky I've been in my. This is the 50th year I've covered IndyCar racing, and I think about how you grow up and you have heroes like they were my heroes growing up, and I go get their autograph at the Speedway or Raceway Park or the Fairgrounds, wherever they were running. Then I started working at the Star, so I started writing about them. Then we became friends. And I did a column a couple years ago for Racer. Might have been last summer. On July 4th, I just called all 4 of them up, and on July 4th, and they were all at home, and we just BS'd for about 20 minutes. And I wrote a story about how lucky I was that I could just pick up the phone and call those guys, and we could talk about the old days or what's going on now. And what we're not going to see, and it's nobody's fault, but we're never going to see somebody like AJ that says what's ever on his mind 100% of the time. Stewart's the closest thing I've seen. Tony Stewart I enjoyed, Stewart he was such a breath of fresh air for NASCAR because, he didn't care what people thought or he just said what was on his mind. He was racing, and if he was mad, then he let you know it. If he thought somebody was an idiot, he'll let you know. Well, that's the way racing is. Racing's a volatile sport. It's an emotional sport. You're hanging your ass out there, so you get mad pretty quick, and there's not a lot of time sometimes to cool off. It's not like basketball or football where you got a 20-minute grace period. Somebody sticks a mic in your face right after you get out of the car or right after you walk back from a crash. So I'd say Foyt's probably, and Mario is the guy that we call whenever anybody has a question about somebody or somebody passes away or there's a rule change or there's a date in history. Mario's the most eloquent spokesperson IndyCar racing's ever had. He's also probably the greatest ambassador. I've never seen him turn down an autograph. I've never seen him turn down a photo. I mean, he never forgot where he came from, and that's what's so cool. And Parnelli's just the same way. He's not around races like Mario is, but those guys are still legends, and they're still revered because of what they came through. They came through the most dangerous era in racing. They survived it. They were fabulous race drivers that could drive anything with four wheels. And Gurney and I were talking the last time I talked to Dan. He said he felt kind of sorry for the guys today, like Scott Dixon, who are just, all they get to run is an IndyCar 16, 17 times a year and maybe a sports car race here and there, but they don't get to go out and race every weekend in something different. He said he just feels sorry for today's generation of drivers because that's what they missed.
Yeah, I mean, Gurney, he won at Riverside about 5 times in a stock car. Never practiced or never ran the full series. Just did that. He ran Le Mans. He obviously ran Indianapolis, and he was the only guy to build his own car and win an F1. I mean, it's just there's no one comparing.
You'll never see that again. Never see that again. And that's what I said. That's why I usually went out on Christmas Eve. I'd fly to L.A. because my sister and my nieces live there, and I'd get Parnelli and we'd go over to Gurney's and have lunch. And we always, wherever we went, people would stop and get their autograph. And Parnelli used to say, "Well, I can't believe anybody knows who we are, first of all. And secondly, I can't believe anybody wants our autograph." And I said, "Rufus, you have no idea what you guys meant to people." And
did they ask who the hell this guy is?
The toughest thing now about IndyCar is Scott Dixon's probably one of the best drivers of the last 25 years, easily. Great guy, hell of a competitor, probably could drive anything if he, put him in a mid-year sprint car. He could probably learn how to do that pretty quick. And he could walk down any street in the United States and nobody has any idea who he is.
He gets robbed in the Taco Bell. That's what happens to Scott Dixon now.
But I worry about, it's just like Joseph Newgarden. He wins a championship. He's an American. He's well-spoken. The fans love him. He's got a great sense of humor. He's even though he sounds like he's from Sweden, he's from Tennessee. And since he's won the championship, there hasn't been, they took him to a couple auto shows, but there hasn't been any national TV commercials about him, and there hasn't been any. I mean, it's just nobody knows who these guys are.
Unfortunately, a lot of the sponsorship is business to business now, isn't it? It's not the consumer brands where they're selling Budweiser on TV or McDonald's, and it's just, I mean, Dixon got the new sponsor this year, and it's a great thing that he's got the bank behind him this time, but it's just they're disconnected from what they had been and having the first class, in store promotions that they had before. Now you've got a corporate bank sponsor.
And do you think it hurts having Elio leave the sport except for the 500?
Oh God, yes. I mean, if Kanaan didn't get a ride, you're going to lose your two most popular drivers in the same year. I mean, every year for the last 10 years, Kanaan and I take drivers and PR people, and we go to the state fair one night. So we've taken one year we had Will Power, Hinchcliffe, Pagenaud, Graham Rahal, Conor Daly, and Dave First usually films it for Channel 6 and does a 5 or 6 minute stand up. And I swear to God, all you have to do is follow us around for an hour, and you cannot imagine how many people know who Tony Kanaan is. I mean, cops, kids, older people, blacks, whites, Latinos. I mean, we're driving. I said, Kanaan, how is this possible that you're always, how do these people know who you are? He goes, I don't know. But it's, and Elio, of course, between his personality and Dancing with the Stars and winning Indy 3 times, those are the two guys that are probably by far the most recognizable people to just the average person.
The two most exciting 500s I've been to, and fan response, were the Weldon's second win, which was obviously because of the Turn 4 crash and him crossing the line in a miracle, and Kanaan winning with the KV car. That was unbelievable.
He's my favorite. It was, the crowd just absolutely erupted when TK won, and I think it's because he just doesn't take himself seriously, and he's relaxed, and you don't get that sense from a Joseph Newgarden yet, where he still has something to prove, whereas, Tony Kanaan and Elio Castroneves don't really have a lot left to prove. They're still mega competitors, but they're more relaxed because they've got more experience.
Yeah, well, and with TK too, here's the thing: what you got to remember is when you've had a career like he's had, and he was kind of becoming the Lloyd Ruby of the Indy 500. He was leading all these laps and never winning the race. Michael Andretti, Lloyd Ruby. Those are the two names that all the races that they've won, and you're thinking, okay, it might never happen. And he pretty much resigned himself to the fact that he was always going to be good at Indy, but he might just be snake bit and never win the race. Hell, Mario only won it once. Look how laps he led. Mario led one more lap in Indy than A.J. Foyt and won one race. A.J. won 4. So, but Kanaan winning Indy just made his whole career. I mean, because he'd been so close, and something happened to him. So, but his sense of humor, the way he interacts with fans, same with Elio. And I think actually we broke the story early July. We were in Iowa, and Marshall Pruitt, who covers IndyCar racing with me at Racer, we broke the story about Elio. This was going to be his last season, and I had to go find him between practice and qualifying. And I said, "Hey, brother, I know this is a terrible time to bring this up, but I got to talk. I'm going to write a story, and it's only fair that you get a chance to respond." And I said, "I hear this is it, that you're going to be a sports car driver full-time next year with Montoya." And he said, "Robin, all I can tell you is this. I got a contract with Roger Penske for next year to drive a car. I don't know what car, I'm not sure which series, but I'm driving for Roger Penske." Well, that told me exactly what I needed. He didn't say, "Oh, that's crap, that's not going to happen." And Roger Penske never really denied it, so we pretty much knew it was true. But the outpouring of the fans really responded, and they still are today. The fans are like, "That's crap, he should be running the whole series." And the other thing is how many people are mad that Montoya's not running Indy, because Montoya could still win the Indy 500 as good as he is. He's not that old.
Not
and he's
far.
Still plenty competitive.
Not far off at all. So right now, you and Marshall have a piece out on Racer.com right now, kind of handicapping or looking at the field in the 500. And you guys are coming up with about 34 cars right now, with Danica's slip up and maybe getting a fourth coin car for Conor and some other possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, when you do this as long as you can't write everything you know, and you can't burn people that tell you stuff off the record, and you got to protect your sources. But you got Sage Karam and J.R. Hildebrand are going to run for Brian Reinbold. Survey's going to run Ray Hall's third car. Connor's going to run Coyne's fourth car. Danica's going to run Ed's third car. So you're going to have 33. You've already got 33 cars locked in right now, 33. And the last few years, they've been running around in the last week in May trying to figure out how we're going to get enough cars. Let's give this guy a motor. Let's give this guy $200,000. So they're not going to have to do that. And it's a pretty deep field. And the real hang-up's going to be people say, "Oh, it'll be great to have bumping again." And I'm kind of like, folks, if there's 34 cars there, who cares? I mean, let them all start. That doesn't make any difference. I mean, bumping was when there were 50 cars going for 33 spots. That was the most dramatic, cruelest, craziest day of racing. That's why you had pole day, bump day, and race day. You had 3 different races in the month of May.
We haven't had an exciting bump day since, I guess, the Andretti cars were so far off, and John Andretti and Danica and Ryan. I think Ryan Hunter-Reay missed it and wound up taking a Foyt car to get in the race. But it's been a decade since we've had a real bump day.
Exactly. You're exactly right. It's been 10 years. So they came up with a Fast 9. That's pretty good. That's dramatic. That's okay. It's just that it used to mean so much to make the Indy 500. If you were a little guy like Ted Prappus or Phil Kruger, and you worked on your own car all winter and built it with your own 2 hands, and you put it in the show, that was like winning the race. That was such an amazing triumph for these guys. And for the last few years, all you really had to do is just show up and you're in the race. So it took away all the – I always laugh when I see, a guy talks about how much pressure is on him qualifying at Indy. I'm like, brother, there's no pressure on you. There's 33 cars. You already got a spot in the race, and you get 9 chances to qualify each day. What pressure is that?
Yeah, the pressure's changed where we make Ed Carpenter go out 3 times to win pole in a day. With this
it doesn't pay
Fast 9
anything.
crowd.
The risk versus the reward's insane. The Indy 500 purse is a joke. It's a joke. $200,000 to start the Indy 500. Hell, your tire bill's $90,000 for the month of May. Who the hell? I said to Richard Childress a few years ago, I said, "Why don't you come run the Indy 500? You're a Chevy guy." And he said, "Well, let me ask you a question, Miller. You're so smart. Why would I spend $1 million to race for $200,000?" And I'm like,
That's a tough one.
I didn't really have an answer for that. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, I said, if you got a good sponsor, he goes, "Yeah, I get you." But he goes, he said, if that purse, if it was what it should be, and he's, the Indy 500 should pay $5 million to win and probably pay $500,000 or $600,000 just to start the race. then you could give a guy a chance to run the whole season. And maybe somebody from IHSAA or somebody from the World of Outlaws or USAC or NASCAR would come field a car for the Indy 500. Because if you could put a sponsorship deal together and it cost you $700,000 and you were going to make $500,000 or $600,000 just for lining up and showing up, then you could justify it.
So speaking of the 34th car, poor Buddy Lazier, who I think is really...
It's time for Buddy to quit, fellas.
Yeah.
It's not,
what
Buddy's
is the deal?
a wonderful guy. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got both arms and legs. You're not going to prove anything. Now, his son, Flynn, is a pretty good little driver, and I know they want to keep this team around until the kid's... He's not... He's a pretty good little open-wheel driver. It's just that at some point you have to say, okay, this is just throwing bad money after good. We can't beat anybody. No real reason to do this.
So yeah, Dakota Davis is sitting on my left. He is 22 years old, born in 1996, the same year Buddy won his last Indy 500.
Oh. He's an adult. He's married.
Yeah,
he has a house.
That's the truth.
So, and I guess they're trying to put a body kit together. That's always kind of a last-minute effort for them, and hopefully they keep that team going and they have a shot to run other drivers down the line. But you don't want them to turn into Marty Roth, right?
Right, and Flynn Lazier, I watched him race last year a couple times, and he's a good little driver. He's only 19, I think, or 20 years old, and he's a hell of a skier, and so he might have a future in this thing. And they know how hard it is to get a ride, so they want to make sure that they'd have something for him.
So what's Conor Daly's prospects? Is it going to be another Pat McAfee situation with the Barstool people, or what's his? Any idea where his funding is this time?
Well, I think there's a guy named Thomas Burns that's going to help him, and I think they're going to have one of the armed forces is going to be one of his sponsors. It's going to be pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah, he had the patriotic car with McAfee, the Shirts for America thing a few years ago. So obviously he's becoming a very high profile guy for IndyCar, and they definitely need to have him. He keeps advancing on this reality TV thing he's doing on CBS. So they got to do something.
Well, he did a good job last year for Foyt, especially the last 6 races. But when somebody comes along like this Mateus Lace and brings $3 or $4 million, you get bought out from your ride. That's basically what happened to him.
That's the way it goes. I mean, you were Graham Hall's number one supporter for 2 or 3 years. While he had the same thing happen to him, and it takes time. Ryan Hunter-Reay bounced around the series before he finally found a good ride too. Absolutely.
Look at Ryan Hunter-Reay. He was testing Robbie Gordon's truck one summer. That's what he was doing. I remember doing a story on him, and he's like, I think my career's probably over. I mean, then he comes back and wins the championship, wins the Indy 500, and certainly one of the guys to beat every weekend. But like Graham learned a really good lesson. I mean, he got a ride right away with Newman Haas, and then it went away, so he had to go out and find sponsorship on his own. So he spent one whole winter just driving around, interacting with board of directors and people, and he grew up a lot there. And he had a couple tough years with Ganassi, and everybody said, this guy can't drive. He's just another rich second-generation kid. Him and Marco ought to go start their own team, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you watch Graham when he was 9, he started running champ cars when he was 17 years old. And you could tell right then he had it. He could go out and throw a lap together at the end of a session and make the Fast Six. And it's just been in the last 3 years where he's really, I mean, racing's all confidence, but he's got his crew, his pit stops are good, his engineering department's really good, and he's driving exactly the way that I thought he would. I mean, I expected him to win a couple races a year. I mean, he's contended for the championship at 3 straight years as a one-car team, boys. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And they've got a pretty good team put together for next year with Sato and whatever backing he has. They're gonna the Rahal cars have been they've been winning practice. Weren't they the fastest in Phoenix?
Yes, every session.
Every session. Wow.
All 4 sessions.
Wow.
Graham was fastest in 1, and Sato was fastest in the other 3. And see, Graham's engineer, Eddie Jones, went to Sato, and then Graham got an ex-Penske engineer, Tom German, who's been kind of in charge, looking over the whole team, and they've clicked right away. So, it's like anything else. Joseph Newgarden, I mean, he had the same engineer with Ed Carpenter for 3 years, Jeremy Millis, and they won races, and they made everybody sit up and take notice. Like, are you kidding me? These guys, this little team's out there kicking everybody's butt. That's pretty impressive. So that's what got him his ride with Penske. And when you actually see what Conor's been through, he's had a different engineer every year, and different teams and different cars, and the guy can drive a race car. You know, he needs to get a little better qualifying and stuff, but it's all about getting confidence and having the same person that you can trust that understands what you need in a race car. It's not magic. You just got to, now he'll go drive for Coyne in May, and Michael Cannon is one of the engineers, and he really likes Conor, and they did really well together a couple years ago. But you got to have some continuity, or you don't have a chance.
Sato was one of those people that was he was surprisingly popular. I've been to 26 500s out of my 34 years, and I remember growing up and all these Ferners coming in here, and Fittipaldi sucks. But Sato, when he won, I was a little nervous about it, but he's been surprisingly popular, and I think you see why when you see his personality.
He's just such a nice guy. Plus, I think people remember he went for it on the last lap in the first turn and didn't make it and crashed. But he did exactly what a race driver is going to do at the Indy 500. He's trying to pass Dario to win the Indy 500. I think people kind of admired his spunk. You know, he's like, no attack, no chance. And he has all these different sayings, but he's a delightful guy. And I think what we really don't realize is he is such a star in Japan and the Orient. He can't go anywhere. I mean, he's a god. You can't even imagine it. So it's he's just he's represented. Hey, and he's really good about the tradition of the Indy 500 and how much he likes the Borg Warner and the milk and all the things. And he's been back here 3 or 4 times just to do things about the tickets and the Borg Warner Trophy and all that. So I think you're right. I think he was a very popular winner, and you would probably have not thought that 5 or 6 years ago.
The Japanese fan base is incredible. Robin, you and I met at Long Beach, I think 2 years ago, and Takuma was driving for Foyt at the time. And I met a fellow, and we did the best we could to communicate. He had flown over from Tokyo, I guess, and he was head to toe in Sato gear. And we flew back. He came in for Long Beach, and then he flew back again in May that year to come to the race. I think he's come back every year. The fan base over there is absolutely rabid.
Yeah, I just kind of wish we still ran Motegi, because the last time we ran Motegi, it was the first time that Sato was in the race, and you couldn't get a ticket. And this racetrack, boys, is out in the middle of nowhere, and you couldn't get a ticket. I've never seen anything like. He had arm guard. He couldn't walk 10. Women are throwing babies at him, and they're all crying, "Oh my God, it's Sato! Touch my baby! Oh, this is good." I mean, you're like, "Holy cow! This is you don't see that very often."
So speaking of Motegi, Danica, she obviously that's where her big win was at. Do you think she accidentally slipped up in her interview with the NASCAR media, or do you think she was trying to get some play for the 500?
No, I think she slipped up because they had it. They had a pretty big plan to have a big blown out press conference, even though we all pretty much knew it was going to be Ed, because that just the way it was pretty simple to figure out after you found out the Dreyer Reinbold thing. I guess a lot of people still thought maybe that's where she was going, but I think the way that I was watching Dave first and the way that she said it, she said, "God, I haven't done that before." So, I do think that was a mistake, because they wanted to have, and they'll still have a big press day. It's not going to hurt it.
It is kind of neat that it's going to be GoDaddy again. It's kind of coming full circle back to one of her, her biggest sponsor in the series over time.
Well, not to mention, she's the most polarizing figure. I mean, people either love her or hate her. There's no middle ground. You guys know that. But it's like, how could you have watched this woman run Indy and not be impressed that she always did a good job?
She was always competitive. She was always she was always, top 2 in 2 races? I know she was second in 1.
I think she finished 4th. I think she's finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Weldon passed her to win.
She was always competitive.
When he won his first race.
She was always competitive at Texas. Her and Tony Kanaan had one of the great races of all time for 2nd place at Homestead. And all these people that say she can't race or she can't drive and she's just a pretty face and she's a marketing machine and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Motegi was a fuel mileage victory. Great. I mean, that wasn't one of her best races. That was just just the way it worked. But she's not the first person to win a race in fuel mileage. But if you watch this woman race on places like I just talked, her and Sam Hornish and Ryan Briscoe had a great race one night at Texas. I think she wound up 3rd, but she led a bunch of laps. People they're ignorant. It's like, pay attention here, folks. she can drive a race car. I mean, and she can drive a race car fast. There are certain tracks. I mean, nobody ever thought she was going to do any good in NASCAR. She can't handle a big stock car. That's so far outside of what her wheelbase is. I mean, her gun sights have been for her whole career. I remember when she was getting ready to go, and she had finished second and beat Kanaan for second at Homestead. And I said, why would you want to go to NASCAR, where you're going to be one of 38 people, and here you got a chance to really do something? And she's like, man, I got to go where I'm wanted and where people. And IndyCar really didn't make an effort to keep her, which was kind of sad, because how do you let your biggest name get away? And they never lifted a finger.
She may lead laps. I don't know if she's going to be a win. She's probably not going to win this race. She's coming in from wherever.
She's not going to win this race.
But she may lead.
I'm not saying she's going to lead laps. I'm saying the car's changed. It's a much tougher field than when she left the IndyCar series, and it's going to be a struggle. And but I still think it's based on what she's done before. How can people say, well, what's she ever done at Indy? Yeah, what's she ever done? She won one race, big deal. Penske let her win that race. Oh, geez. It's just like you can't argue with people sometimes. You just kind of just shake your head and say, okay, you know everything.
Yeah, I think it was partly the fact that she was a woman. I mean, there's just no way around it. And you always heard that about Lynn St. James. But I also think that when she was younger and she was around the track, she didn't do herself a lot of favors. And that's sort of always been the rap on her. But she was always super competitive. And I think that feeds kind of into it. I mean, I remember when she threw her helmet during qualifications, and it's like everything she did was polarizing. There were people who were like, that shows her competitive spirit. And they're like, oh, she's a whiner. But I think you need that sort of drama, and I think that's what we talked about with Tony Stewart. You need somebody who is polarizing that makes people feel an emotion as opposed to, just a nice Canadian boy.
Well, she's this tiny, pretty little gal that's running an Indy car. She's leading the Indy 500 with inside of 10 laps. And the noise that day, I've never heard anything like it.
Yep.
And, again, that's the kind of thing where you've got to capitalize on that. And IndyCar did a little bit, but not nearly what they should have. They didn't, Sports Illustrated cover, the first Sports Illustrated cover in 20 years. And it just, I just think... I just think she's along with Sarah Fisher and with Simona Di Silvestro, and Catherine Legg, all four of them Janet Guthrie and Lynn St. James never raced anybody in the IndyCar. They went backwards. They could go fast by themselves. They didn't race anybody. Don't anybody kid you. They shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath with the four women I just mentioned, because those women, competitive, they passed people on the outside, they took chance. I mean, they were racers, and I think Simona's probably the best road racer that we've ever seen in an Indy car. So,
and she had two fiery crashes in 1 year and didn't bat an eye. I saw her in the pit or in the garage area with her hand bundled up. You couldn't even see her fingers.
She's also
but she was still running.
She's also Simona's incredibly eloquent too. I saw her at Media Day last year, and she answered a few questions about female drivers that just were stunning. And I think that's the other part of it. These women get women interested in the sport, especially Danica. I mean, females which last time I checked were half the population, were really into racing at that point. And again, I think that's why it was a mistake to let her go, like you said.
Well, you might not have been able to stop her because of all the money that was being thrown at her. I get that. I mean, Sam Hornish made the most sense of anybody. I mean, he won everything he could in open wheel. When you think about what he did, he's won some Busch races or whatever they call it, Series Xfinity races, and Sam was a good race driver, but he did it. It was the timing was perfect for him. For Danica, it was where the money was, and I mean, she's made more money than she could have ever dreamed when she was over there in Europe running the Formula Ford when she was 16 years old. See, that's the other thing people don't get. She was by herself without her mom or dad, 16 years old, running Formula Fords in England in the Formula Ford Festival, which was a big stepping stone for a lot of guys to get to Formula One someday. I mean, she had the moxie that she had a great resolve, and she was the first one I ever saw that just had that. She had that package that she was going to kick your ass, or she was going to try, and people are like, oh yeah, she kicked a lot. Well, believe me, she's if you look at her finishing record in certain segments of IndyCar racing, I mean, the tracks I mentioned, she had a really good finishing record at Indy and Texas and Homestead and places where you had to go really fast and run close. So NASCAR, look at all the guys in NASCAR that have tried to make. Dario didn't do any good. PT did okay for a while. He got punted a couple times. And, other than Foyt and Gurney and Mario, I mean, we really never had any IndyCar guys do that well. But how many NASCAR guys have won an IndyCar race? Nobody. I mean,
right.
Foyt and Gurney and Mario all won the biggest races you can win in NASCAR, and no NASCAR guys ever come close to winning an IndyCar race. So I want to hear about, who the best drivers are. That's another argument that makes me tired.
Yeah, Stewart's probably about the only crossover being an IRL champ. I know it was a thinned out field at the time, but they won a championship on both sides.
Barry Green tried to get Tony to come run kart, and he said no because he was recovering from a broken pelvis. And Barry Green called me and said, "Hey, you're buddies with Tony Stewart. Tell him I want to hire him." So I called Stewart at his mom's house, and he was laying on the couch recovering. I said, "Hey, Barry Green wants to pay you a bunch of money to come run kart," and he's like, "Man, that's flattering, but I'm going to stay with Menard and Tony George." And they gave me a chance, and they gave me my first chance, so I'm going to be loyal to him. And he was, until Joe Gibbs made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I mean, again, if John Menard would have been smart, John Menard's worth $6 billion. John Menard could have said, it's just unbelievable to me that a guy like John Menard wouldn't have said, "Okay, Tony, you're the best driver I've ever had. I'll take you to NASCAR someday if you want me to, but let's keep going here with open wheel racing." Stewart would have won Indy a couple times, so he won Indy a couple times. Just had to be a stock car, but it's interesting perceptions and realities of racing, fellas. That always just cracks me up.
So we got just a few minutes left here. You used to cover back in the '90s. You were also responsible for covering some stuff over at the Colts complex. What in the world has happened to our football team in the last 2 weeks?
Well, I think about when I was a sports columnist. Bill Bennett and I were sports columnists for the Star, so we wrote 3 or 4 columns a week. He did the Pacers, and I did the Colts. Well, 1 year we started out 0-13. 1 year we were 1-15. 2 years we were 3-13. And it was just nobody wore Colts jerseys. Nobody cared. And then Jimmy Irsay got smart and said, "You know what? I'm going to go get me a football guy." So he went and got Bill Tobin from the Bears. He got Jim Harbaugh. We almost made the Super Bowl. If there had been instant replay, they would have been in the Super Bowl because Pittsburgh would have never scored one of their touchdowns. But that's another story.
I'm still bitter about it.
So you get Peyton Manning, and you spoil this city, and everybody thinks you're supposed to win 12 games every year. Well, that's not how it works. It just happened to work because we had Peyton Manning. And then Chuck Pagano, who I never met, seemed like a really nice guy, but he seemed like one of those guys that was a perfect coordinator. He wanted to be buddies with everybody. You can't be buddies with everybody. And what I like about Frank Reich is the first thing he said was, "We're going to have discipline. We're going to be disciplined, and that's going to be first and foremost." And I think that was one of the things that happened to the Colts is, nobody was really held accountable, and they stunk the place up. But what people have to remember, fellas, is that Frank can't come in here and turn this thing around. Even with Andrew Luck, as good as he is, we're still not a very good football team. We're the 4th best team in the AFC South, talent-wise.
So
it's going to take 2 or 3 years for this team to, I think Ballard seems to be pretty sharp. Give these guys a chance, but it's a 2 or 3 or 4 year process. That's what people have to remember. And our fans are so impatient because they were so spoiled by Peyton Manning. It's like, no, folks, this is the reality of pro sports.
Well, and they're really soft. If you go to any other stadiums and watch games, the Indianapolis crowd in general is just completely different than a Buffalo or a Pittsburgh or how they engage with their team in general.
Danny, my dad had season tickets from 1984 on, and when you go now, it's corporate types, caramel types. In the 80s, you had Cleveland Browns fans barking in my little face, scared me to death, and he would curse, and it was so much fun. And now it's just not as much fun because it's so corporate. So I think losing for a few more seasons might be a good thing for the
harden us
up
a little bit.
Yeah, it's a soft town, Robin.
Well, here's the thing.
How were your prop bets for the Super Bowl?
I was awesome. I won 11 out of 15, but that was a fluke. Here's what you got to remember. I had season tickets forever when I was covering the Colts. And when Ron Meyer was the coach, I remember starting a column saying, as a loyal season ticket holder, and Ron Meyer called up a ticket manager and says, does Miller have season tickets? He goes, yeah, he's had 4 since 1984, Coach. He goes, damn it. So here's what you got to remember. Pittsburgh, Green Bay, Philadelphia, they sit out in all kinds of weather. They start tailgating at 7 in the morning. They start drinking at 7 in the morning. There's some obnoxious human beings in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, boys. Don't ever kid yourself.
They booed the Pope.
Most obnoxious fans you will ever meet. But they'll sit out in those elements, rain, snow, 20 below. Our fans barely come back for the third quarter after they get done drinking.
Well, if the roof's open, you don't know if you
need
need
sunglasses.
sunglasses.
Why did you buy a ticket if you're not here to watch the game? You can drink any time.
At half the
It
price.
used to make me crazy. I'd watch the people. I'd watch all the empty seats. 7 minutes to go in the third quarter, and there's all these empty seats. I'm like, where the hell are these people? Why do they come to the games?
Final. We're about out of time, Jer.
Yeah, we're running down on it here. Well, Robin, I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I know you're. We'd love to have you in
It's
studio.
always good to have the youth of America that cares about the same things I care about. I worry sometimes that we don't have very many young race fans anymore, so you guys are going to have to sell it to your buddies and get them to show up.
We're out here. I take my brother Danny and I who's sitting here. We take about 20 or 25 folks to turn 3 in the infield every year for the race. Some of us have seats in the stands. Some know the race is happening, and some don't. But it's a hell of a time.
Well, that's what always happened, though, is when people that used to go to the snake pit and get hammered, and they'd lay down, they watch the first 2 laps, and they'd pass out, and they'd wake them up for the last 10, eventually got old enough to buy tickets, and they became fans. So that's how it works. I get all that. That's fine.
I was out in the snake pit, and I work for a local radio station. I was out there covering it, and I hadn't been out there ever. And I went. It was 200,000, 100,000 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds drinking, having fun, listening to techno music, and I'm like, this is the greatest idea ever. These kids could give 2 craps about the race, but in 20 years, 20 years they're going to be buying tickets.
Well, you hope they are, but I'm not sure that's true because I just don't see the people. I don't see that passion of let's follow this driver, or let's go drive to Mid-Ohio, or let's go to Gateway. I just don't see that. I just don't. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think. I don't know.
The product's so good, though.
I don't see that crossover like I did when I was growing up. I don't think kids care about cars anymore. You guys do, but I just don't think kids do.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of 20-year-olds don't even get their driver's license now.
I know.
It's the craziest thing.
They don't even care about driving. I'm like, what?
You can't even see the motor on a car anymore. You open up the hood and it looks like a piece of plastic.
Right.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, Robin. This is a
boys,
dream come
good
true
talk
for
to
me. Follow you on racer.com, NBC, and on the Facebook, I suppose.
That's great. We take any and all callers. That's right.
Very cool. All right. Well, we appreciate it, and we're going to send folks your way. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin.
Okay, guys. Good talking to you.
Thanks. All right. Very good.
All right.
Great time.
Not bad, huh?
No, I really love Robin Miller. He's one of my heroes in town. I've been a race fan forever, and somebody who's been in media. You know, I look up to Robin because he just says it like it is. And somebody said on the thing, hey, I don't even like racing, but this dude's really entertaining. And it's just because he says exactly what he thinks, and I think we need more of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Jeremiah sent in kind of like a group message a bunch of different podcasts that he'd been on, like listen to how Robin does all of his different interviews whenever he goes on podcasts and he goes on different radio shows and the things that he does. And he's super entertaining. Like just sitting here listening to him was awesome. He does such a good job.
So he is Robin's battling cancer. It's no secret. It's about out there in the media that he's fighting that, and he's looking. The racing community is trying to support him. So he mentioned Marshall Pruitt, who works with it at Racer. They are going to do a sticker drive. So if folks are listening, want to help out, kick in towards his costs. All these guys are independent contractors, so they don't have the they don't have the full-time paid go to the factory job like everybody else does. They put this stuff together. So through Marshall, they're going to be selling some stickers, and if folks that are listening can help that out, we can definitely try to support him in his recovery.
The racing community, I mean, when I worked out there for the PR department from 2004 to 2009, and that was a very transitionary period for a lot of people from, the boomer generation over to more of the millennial reporters. But you had a lot of people, ESPN was shedding jobs, the Speedway was shedding jobs, and you had a ton of reporters following not only the series, but racing in general. And then the jobs just became less and less and less. And along with that went health insurance. And so a lot of these guys who just have been involved in the racing community are getting older, and including several of my friends. And you just go, oh, because it's not easy, because they're the original gig economy folks. And that's what a lot of people are not aware of, is that people who work in racing are gig economy people. They go from team to Speedway to series back to team, and they, along with that, it's a very transitionary job. So he is one of the most interesting personalities in racing in history. He is somebody that drove Tony George and the Speedway crazy because he would say the truth as opposed to whatever the Speedway wanted them to say. And just love Robin Miller a lot. So yeah, if you're a race fan, you definitely want to get one of these stickers and support him, because he's a great guy, really nice guy. He took an hour out of his time to talk to the four of us,
to us and the fans, and we do appreciate him very much.
Yeah.
And he would have talked for another hour, I don't think, without a problem.
Yeah.
So
easily.
Great guy.
I know. I like that you started out the interview with Marion Pierce. What is this podcast? Every time I come on the Boss Hog, I go, what is this podcast? Marion Pierce.
Marion Pierce is the number one basketball. He's the number two scorer in the history of Indiana high school basketball.
I guess that's a Newcastle thing. I'm from Plainfield, where we have
it's a Louisville
airplanes.
thing. Okay, last night we had Tom Saunders on, who's the state representative from Louisville, Indiana.
Right.
We started with a Louisville reference. We are courting the Tri-High audience like you've never seen. That is the key to victory in podcasting.
Well, you guys are doing great work. How much longer do you want to do this show before we go over to the We Are Libertarians show?
We can call it quits here. We appreciate everybody listening. We'll end it here. And next Thursday night we've got Steve Horwitz, noted economist. Dakota's going to take the lead on that one, because I know he's a brilliant guy, but Dakota is the fanboy.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Steve Horwitz, and I kind of mentioned this on the way over, although I used Jordan Peterson as kind of my reference.
Right.
But I listen to a lot of Steve Horwitz. I read basically everything that he puts out. I think he's a really smart person. I really enjoy everything that he does.
Love it. I love his wife. Sarah Squire is a great human being, and she's also a very accomplished libertarian thinker herself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm nervous about, Chris, and you've obviously on We Are Libertarians, you've had a lot more experience with people than what I have coming through, and one of the things I'm nervous about is just I don't even know how to ask a person at that level questions.
First of all, you mentally you have to go. We're not on the same level. We're on the same level. You know what I mean? Like, you guys, I could tell, and this is why I hate doing interviews. We Are Libertarians, which we're going to do the We Are Libertarians episode right after this on the We Are Libertarians page. We're going to talk about the shooting, but I don't like to do interviews because of the nerves that Jeremiah was having before it.
This is the very first time I've done a telephone interview. This is episode 44 of Boss Hog, and the very first time we've done telephone, and we had, I don't know, about 4 minutes to put it together to get the data working, and that was that. Not
it's nerve-wracking.
You know how I like to plan.
I drove really fast. That wasn't on me.
Yeah, no, it was. There was a whole cat incident that Spangle may or may not get into on his show.
My
but
poor kitty got her head
terrifying.
stuck. Yeah, my heart was breaking. I don't know how I could ever be a parent.
But I'm not talking about as in a level on a personal level.
Sure.
But I mean, just solely based on intelligence.
Well, and so I don't know, because I'm of moderate intelligence myself. But I think you just kind of have to stick to your guns a little bit, because I think he unnecessarily picks on Jordan Peterson, and I think why is a good question.
Yep.
And, he does it unnecessarily. He is, but he may have a point of view that we just haven't heard anybody talk about yet, and he was very much abused, for no other word. He was abused by the alt-right. So I could see how he would have a chip on his shoulder against anyone that was admired by the alt-right, because the way that alt-right libertarians treated Steve Horowitz was absolutely atrocious because he's a good dude as far as I can tell. So,
yeah. And that's one of the things, a little Easter egg before we leave. I guess one of the final things is that we're going to get into because, I really enjoy listening to Jordan Peterson. Steve had like 4 statuses on Facebook right in a row. Just
he's picked on him over the months. Yeah,
he's criticized Jordan Peterson and as well as his listeners and his followers, and I kind of want to get into that with him because I don't know what he thinks, but I'm really interested in hearing any criticisms that he has about him.
Right. Well, very good. I appreciate everybody listening, following us. BossHogLiberty.com, like, subscribe, hit the YouTube channel, all those fun ways. And we will catch you all Thursday night with Steve.
Thank you for listening.